Let's bring in News 13 legal analyst Mark NeJame, who is standing by. Mark, let me just ask you, what did you think about that exchange there involving potential juror B86?
I think it was an honest one. I think you're hearing the jurors, and that's credit to the lawyers too, to get them to loosen up a bit and to get them to talk is what you want. You want them opening up, and you want them to be able to talk about their real selves and who they are, so that lawyers can get a better sense of who they're going to be keeping and not keeping. I think that those are the human issues, those are the personal issues that get into a juror's mind when they're sitting on a jury. They're going to be sitting back and wondering why this or that happens. You know, it's very interesting. Sometimes we have a case, and at the conclusion of it, you've worked so hard and you think that you know all the legal theories and the direction you're going, and you talk to a juror and they're in a completely different tangent. They voted on something that was completely extraneous or outside of, you know, your frame of reference that you were dealing with the entire time. So I think that this was a good, healthy exchange. I'm glad to see it. I think it helps get there. Now, what you saw, though, is Bernie De La Ronda is wanting to presumably exclude this juror for cause. Because remember, you only have 10 preemptory strikes. So when those 10 are up, arguably you don't get any more unless the judge opts to, at her discretion, to give you more. But basically, you want, when you're on one side or the other, to be able to throw out a potential juror that you don't like on a cause challenge. Basically, they have a bias, a prejudice, or they're not able to render a fair and impartial decision. So that doesn't count against your 10 preemptories. So you saw the state trying to potentially get into it that, are you sure you can be fair and impartial? Because if they don't already, the suggestion would be that there's already some sort of judgment about the way Trayvon was raised from this juror, thinking that maybe the parents could have done better. Well, that's not something the prosecutor wants to hear, so he's going to want to bounce her based upon cause rather than having to give up one of his preemptory challenges down the line. So that's what some of the strategy and some of the questioning is about that you're hearing unfolding.
A little intense in there for a while. Mark Omero's like, take a deep breath, would you like a drink of water? Trying to, I guess, maybe possibly calm down the potential juror who wasn't quite ready for that line
what he's also doing is getting the juror to like him. And, you know, you're wanting to be nice. In fact, you're seeing Bernie De La Ronda be the nicest we've seen throughout, really all of the lawyers. But, I mean, he's a pretty intense, passionate personality. And you've seen him take it down a few notches. Because why? You're going to be with those jurors for 4 to 5 weeks, potentially. And you want them to like you. You want them to think that you're a good person who's only going to advocate the truth on behalf of your client, whether it's the state or whether it's George Zimmerman. So a lot of that is really just interpersonal relationships and psychology that's going on. And it's not uncommon, but you're actually able to see it minute by minute as we're watching this unfold on TV.
You can make and break your case in jury selection.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, News 13 legal analyst Mark NeJame. We'll be back with you in just a few minutes. Here in Seminole County, and I'm sure all across Orange County, Danny Trainer standing by for a check of our weather, which has been very stormy here in Central Florida. Danny?
Hey, Kelly.
Pretty good time distance away from that. Let's bring in News 13 legal analyst Mark NeJame for more here. Mark, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions regarding hardships, again, from this last witness, or not witness, but potential juror who was just questioned. She said one of her hardships was her son was going to be home and she wanted to spend time with her son. Another hardship from someone else who said they were going on a family vacation this summer at the end of June. Talk to me about how that works. Are those good enough hardships that they cannot get picked for this jury?
Look, everybody's going to go through some hardship. It's hard to find somebody that's going to be away from their home, their work, their family for 6 to 8 weeks and not experience some measure of hardship. The issue is going to be is the hardship such that it really works an economic hardship where somebody can't pay their bills, they're not going to be able to care for their elderly parent, they're not going to be able to care for their minor children. Those are they're an employer and they have many people that work for them and the business cannot sustain without them being present. So yes, those hardships are definitely looked at and respected almost always by the courts. Other hardships like, well, I'm not going to be able to see my child as much as I would like. Well, for me, that would be an enormous hardship. But the reality of it is that it doesn't necessarily rise to the level. Because you're going to, unless they're sequestered, they're not going to be, they're going to be home at night. And they're going to be able to see their family in the evenings, and it's really not going to be much different than if they were, in fact, working away from their home, and then they come back to home after work. So a lot of those are uncomfortable. They're outside their family norm, but they're really not hardships that are going to rise to the level that they should be excluded. Now, a trip that's already scheduled, where you've got airline tickets and matters such as that, I've never seen a judge reject it if you've already got all these done ahead of time. But to say that, well, we're planning something, well, then, you know, the judges are typically going to say, well, then you can plan around it at another time. So there's a lot of subjectivity involved, but there's also a lot of respect being given because the judges, one, they're people and they know that people have obligations, but two, you don't want somebody who's so distracted that they're not going to pay attention.
Let's bring in our next potential juror.